Anthony Wootton. This is the Transatlantic Sports Show. Very special program here, looking ahead to the MLB London Series, which is this weekend at the London Stadium, the New York Mets against the Philadelphia Phillies. We've been ramping up to this MLB London Series over the past couple of weeks, and today we're going to treat you to the Mets side of things. We've got a Mets fan's perspective on this NL East rivalry. It is Mike Silva from the Talkin Mets podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Transatlantic Sports Show. I can't believe that this week is finally here. We had the announcement for the London Series, and you know what it's like when the tickets come on sale. It seems like it's a month away. It's in the far off distance. It's actually here. This is actually game week, and we've got the New York Mets and the Philadelphia Phillies over in London. This NL East rivalry. The matchup is coming to London. Cannot wait. I hope you've been enjoying the preview content that we've been supplying for you here on the Transatlantic Sports Show. If you are listening, you want to check out the video content, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just look for Transatlantic Sports Show or at TASS_UK. And then likewise, if you found us on YouTube and you're like, actually, I want to listen to this whilst I'm out on a walk or running or vacuuming the house, then just search for the Transatlantic Sports Show on your podcast provider. And of course, you can follow us on social media at TASS_UK, because you don't want to miss the content that we're going to be sharing with you across this weekend. From Friday right through the weekend, we got field access. You name it, we're there for the MLB London Series. But let's continue our preview and get a Mets perspective on things on this matchup. And I'm delighted to say that I've got the host of the Talkin Mets podcast, Mike Silva, joining us from NYC. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. That's a great intro. And of course, US, America's pastime, UK, London, the connection our two countries have had going back, almost 300, well, for a long time.
Yeah.
This is a perfect synergy for America's pastime as it tries to expand into the international realm in a bigger way. And what better way to do it than with our friends over in London? So thanks for having me.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's quite poignant, isn't it? This week of all weeks, the special relationship. We've marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day and those brave men who stormed the beaches of Normandy. And then just a couple of days later, here we are in London, in Stratford, where we saw the great scenes of the 2012 Olympics. And we've got your team over here against your NL East rivals, the Philadelphia Phillies. Mike, we got you on to give us a Mets perspective on things. Season's been a bit inconsistent, I'm sorry to say. You're well below 500. However, at time of recording, you've won back-to-back games against the Washington Nationals. So things could be looking up heading to London.
Yeah, it's been a weird couple of years. You know, the Mets had a great 2022 with a disappointing ending, and with their owner, Steve Cohen, and you know, sparing no expense trying to spend his way into contention, while the Mets, as he took over the team post-COVID, were in a bit of a dry spell when it came to player development and investment because of the prior ownership and what they elected to do. And, you know, because of the fact that they've been trying to do it by plug and play at the big league level as they build that farm system, it hasn't been easy. You know, the Mets went into last season with the highest payroll, I think, in North American sports history. They disappointed. They tore it apart to reboot. They brought in a new president of baseball operations, a new manager. And this season was supposed to be maybe not quite the spending or the pomp and circumstance, but they expected to compete. And, you know, the interesting part about them is that although on paper nothing is sexy, you look at the numbers, anybody who's a baseball fan looks, their starting pitching's been okay. Their bullpen went from being very good to now very disappointing. And every one of their core players, the guys that you would, you know, expect to be talking about, I'm sure over there, Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, their closer, who will not be available, I believe, for the series because he's on the injured list, Edwin Diaz, have underperformed, not to their career best, but just to what you'd expect. And it's left you in this weird, hey, you know, you're staring at what the trade deadline, for those who don't know, that's the deadline where you could trade players, comes up at the end of July, which is about 6 weeks away, where now the talk is, you know, who can they get to, you know, to build for the future? Yet the Mets, because everybody else has kind of been meandering in this weird 500, sub 500 world, are only a few games out of the playoffs right now. So it's a critical next couple of weeks. These are actually critically important games. The Phillies are on a pace, a really well over 100-win pace. And in a lot of ways, what you see the Phillies have become over the last couple of years. 2 years ago at this time, the Phillies were a mess. They fired their manager. They were under 500. They wound up going to the World Series that year. The Mets on that same period of time were flying high. And now 2 years later, nobody could have predicted that. So in a lot of ways, you see the Phillies who what the Mets really want to be, and the Mets who are trying to figure out this thing. But two popular Northeast franchises. And again, with the connections of our country, I don't think Philadelphia, New York are, if you're a history fan, Philadelphia, New York should be very familiar to the people of London because there's a lot of connections there between your country and those two American cities.
Absolutely, man. Hey, and the stars are coming out. We got the first pitcher is on the Saturdays, Matthew Broderick, and then on Sunday,
Wow.
I think it's the Phillies are the home team on Sunday, and it's Rob McElhenney, as I guess you would suspect, being the
Wow.
co-owner of Wrexham. So the stars are going to be out in force representing your respective teams. Like you said, there we're not even at the halfway stage of the season because it's a long old season in baseball, and that's
Yep.
the beauty of it, though, isn't it? If you can start finding that consistency, and like I said at the time of recording, the Mets have won
Right.
back-to-back games. If that could be the building block, then who knows about a wild card run? And as we know, the wild card round in the Major League Baseball in the postseason, that could lead to anything.
Yeah, what's interesting we talked before I came on the air. You were talking about the growth of baseball and how obviously American football has been, across the world has been trying to grow and is extremely popular. Obviously, European football, soccer, we call it here.
Mhm.
NBA has been doing a great job since the late 80s, early 90s, growing internationally. And now baseball is trying to do the same thing. What's interesting is that those sports, although the NBA is not quite weekly, they're not night in and night out. They're
Mm.
not this grind, this long chess match. And my nephew, I was talking to him a couple of months ago, and what was disappointing to me is he plays basketball. He loves basketball. He loves the NBA. Him and his friends are not as into baseball as maybe I was as a kid, and I think that that's where something like this is important to continue to remind the world and showcase. Yes, it may not be a once a week gambling expedition like football. It
Mm.
may not have the athleticism of the NBA, and it certainly doesn't have the worldwide appeal of football, European football, or soccer. But it's a sport that's almost like chess. I don't know if anybody who plays chess. It's a I don't want to say it's just a thinking man, but there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of drama, there's a
Mm.
lot of anticipation. You may not have the constant back and forth. Like, I'm a big NBA fan. I just was watching the Knicks in the playoffs. You're on the edge of your seat from the minute the ball tips off to the end, which I got to tell you is exhausting. I have to I feel like I've run a marathon after the game, and I'm like, oh. Now baseball has certain components of that, but it's that ebb and flow. It's that chess match. It's that let me play along with the manager to see what they'll do with the pitcher. Let me see how this hitter can approach this at bat. And I'm not saying those who don't like it are not thinkers or anything like that. It's a different type of sports experience, and I think that that's the appreciation that we have to bring back. And I'm hoping that the games, as a guy who covers the Mets, now I am trying to be a journalist and be impartial. I want to see the Mets win. I'd
Yeah.
love to see 2-10-0. I'd love to see 2-10-0 victories. But in order for the sport to really be appreciated, hopefully there's a lot of that back and forth nuance, close game, big pitches, that really has those who are new to the sport in the UK, or if they're just traveling to the UK from other parts of the globe, really understand why this is a great sport. There's a reason why it's America's pastime. And I'm hoping that it can be showcased as such. I know they've had a couple other games there, but having a New York team, they're not the Yankees. I know the Yankees were there back in 2019 against the Red Sox. Those are iconic teams.
Mhm.
The Mets are in that iconic sphere, but in a different way, a much younger. I mean, the Yankees have been around since the early 1900s. The
Mm.
Yankees have been around. They're not that young anymore, 60 years, but in comparison to the Red Sox and the Cubs and the Yankees and the Cardinals, they're still babes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I was chatting on the previous podcast with Charles Walford from the Times, which is
Yeah.
a UK national publication, and
Mhm.
he went out to New York and Philly for the series or the two series at the start of May to experience this
Sure.
rivalry. And he commented on how much younger the Mets are as a franchise, and like you said, I think the most storied franchises in U.S. sports are those Yankees and Red Sox, that old rivalry. So I think there's a reason why MLB had chosen those two in that matchup to be the first ever London series over here. You talked about your energy levels watching the Knicks. And look, I know exactly what that's like and what it takes to
Yeah,
follow a team in the NBA, especially throughout the postseason. But
right.
do you need a certain level of energy to prepare yourself for an MLB season, for games that go on for well over 100 games, in a season? That's it's a long old slog. And can you commit yourself to be able to watch every game, or how many home
It's
games do you
tough.
get to?
No, I mean, look, as far as getting to the ballpark, I mean, my heyday, I'm talking about when I'm younger, I'd go to 20, 25 games a year.
Right.
And that's pre-internet. Well, no, the internet was around, but it wasn't like it
Yeah.
is today at that
Yeah.
point. I think the thing about baseball is, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's that, it was the late Bart Giamatti, the former commissioner of baseball, Yale professor. He said it's this thing that's with you starting in really around Valentine's Day when you look at pitchers and catchers in spring training. And then
Mm.
every night, whether it's by the radio, TV, and the beauty of that game is that while you're listening, you could be going doing your chores in the car, flip it from the TV to the radio. You could be, talking to your friend or your spouse, or your partner, or whatever it may be. It's easy breezy. There's a couple of moments you got to hone in, but you could get the feel of the game. See, I don't think you could do that with the NFL. You can't do that with the
Mm.
NBA. And it's
Yeah.
with you every night. Spring, 4th of July, August into September, and then in the fall and October, if you make the postseason, all of a sudden the snap, it's gone. And then the next day, you'll wake up, and even if you're not glued to the TV for every pitch, for every inning, that's very tough. It's like, well, it's like my best friend left me.
Mm.
Like, or when you left, you go to a summer vacation and you left your friend. It's like, well, now what do I do? How do I
Yeah.
plug those 3 hours? Yeah, you have the NBA, you have the NFL on Sunday. Look, there's a ton of European football fans in this country. I mean, I don't want to be a stereotype, but Ted Lasso was a great show. I'm sure you guys hate it. My wife and I loved it. I'm sure you guys hate it. There are things to do,
Yeah.
but not quite the night in and night out partnership. And it really becomes a fabric of your life, and you start to get to know the players, and the announcers. I mean, that's the thing. The announcers are there every night. You almost feel like you use like their first name to reference them.
Yeah.
With the Mets, it's Gary, Keith, and Ron. Keith Hernandez used to play for the Mets, and Ron used to play for the Mets when they last won their championship, the 80s. Gary Cohen, who's been a Mets announcer and grew up a Mets fan. I mean, he's been a Mets announcer since 1989. It's just this part of your life. And because of the way the sport is, because what people criticize it about, the slowness, the chess-like, I don't want to think, I want action. I want, LeBron. I want Jordan. I want, 60-yard passes. But that, requires you glued to this thing. That requires an emotional investment, which there is a value to that. I need that as a sports fan, but I need this because I need to be able to breeze in. There are games that you want to glue yourself in. There are games you're like, hey, today I'll check in on the Mets
Mm.
because they're going to be there tomorrow. And obviously with technology, it makes it so much easier to watch MLB.TV and watch short recaps and things like that. Maybe there's some nuance lost there, but you can enjoy the sport throughout the year without being glued to your TV like the other professional sports. And I think there's a certain value to that. And I think that that's why it's always been woven into the fabric of our daily lives for, 8 or 9 months a year.
Yeah, there's something magical about having the sport on in the background. Like you said, you could be doing the ironing. It's like when the
Yep.
cricket's in full flow over here. I mean,
Yep.
cricket, we have 5 days of a match and
It
it
was
could
like
end in a
7 hours.
draw, it's a
The
tie.
World
And
Series
like,
is out by me.
dude.
They have actually, it's ironic. Here we are sending baseball to you. You guys, I mean, I'm passing it as I drive into the city today. The Cricket World Series, and
That's
I'm like,
right.
and that's the beauty, because Anthony, like, we could get involved in all the differences and garbage that are going on, but all of this is where we're all the same. Like,
Yeah.
we love sports. We love coming together. We love rooting for our team, and nobody is more passionate about sports. And I got to tell you, I admire, and I mean this sincerely, the passion of the European football fan. Like, I'm watching games and I'm like, they're chanting and they're cheering and they're coming together. It's like a big party. We don't necessarily always have that here
Mm.
as American sports fans. I wish we did, and people have told me that there's a component of that. The Mets may come as close because they have the 7 line in the outfield, and the fans will come together in groups on the road and at Citi Field at home. So it's kind of a beautiful thing, and maybe I don't know what will happen in London this week. And maybe there's a component of that fandom that some of those who are coming to the ballpark will bring in, and could teach us a little bit.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens at the West Ham Stadium, the London Stadium, this weekend. That leads us nicely into the ones to watch. You mentioned a few names there a little bit earlier from the Mets, but reasons for us to get excited. People listening, perhaps going to this game is going to be their first baseball
Mhm.
experience. They don't know who to root for. We've told them about the Phillies and some of the star names there, but who are the guys to watch, two or three players to watch for and look out for this weekend?
Well, everybody, the old saying is chicks dig the long ball, right? That whole thing. So chicks dig the long ball. So, Pete Alonso, I think is the first name to look at where, uh, and I think you had mentioned as we maybe at the beginning of this broadcast, or maybe we were talking offline, that it's a bit of a home run stadium there in
Mm,
London. And I remember watching the Yankees and the Red Sox pre-COVID, and I was out to lunch and I look up and it's like 6-6. I'm like, oh, well, let me see if it's the seventh inning. Oh, it's the first inning. I'm like,
first inning.
all right, we got slow pitch softball going on over here. So that's definitely something that could be out there. Francisco Lindor, somebody that I think gets criticized a lot because he got a big contract. And I think sometimes here in American sports, when you get big contracts, we forget who we're paying,
Right.
not who we want them to be. But his play at shortstop, his ability, his range, his grace, how his body moves is something that I definitely think that those in London should take a look at. And Brandon Nimmo is one of those guys that's like what baseball's all about. Not sexy, good athlete, but not sexy, not eye-popping numbers. But offensively, he does a lot of little things, gets on base, works the count, consistently tries to improve his offensive game. And he's not a bad defensive player. That is like a composite of all the good in baseball. And what baseball, it's not like Jordan's, move in the finals or something you see, a dunk that you see in an NBA game. It's what baseball's about. It's a lot of little things that you do well. It's the sands of time. And all of a sudden you look up and like,
Mm.
wow, that's a pretty good season. And unfortunately with the pitching, I think there's some solid pitchers. You'll see some solid veteran pitchers. And I think Manaea and Jose Quintana are pitching. Nothing flashy, but some solid veterans. And I really wish, and this is a miss, but Edwin Diaz is on the injured list right now. But for the people of London to see, at his best,
Mm.
Diaz is so electric coming out of the bullpen, playing the trumpets, the Timmy trumpets. I don't know if they were going to do that. You were going to miss out on that. That's a missed opportunity. But when he's on, you can't hit him, and you get to really see how hard it is to hit this little white dot
Yeah.
that's moving at you. Now, I would argue I stink at golf. That little white dot that's standing there, I can't hit that at all. I'd rather hit the 98-mile-an-hour fastball. I won't hit it. Maybe I'll foul it off. Maybe I would argue that. But I think those are some names to watch. But I really, whether it's Bryce Harper on Philadelphia, JT Realmuto, or the Phillies who are really coming together. I think just appreciating the game and the competition. And if you're not a big Mets or Phillies fan, you're just trying to learn the sport. Like, this is a good sport. Yeah, it's a long season. They've tried to shorten the games to about 2.5 hours. It's still, you're gonna have to dedicate 3 hours. I get it. That's a lot of time for anybody. But there's a lot of fun in following whatever the team is. There's a lot of activities in fantasy baseball and Stratomatic baseball. If you're a baseball fan and you haven't gone on the Stratomatic baseball, Strato-matic, you go on there, you could learn. It's real stats, real and I'm giving them a plug. I'm not getting paid. I'm just a big fan. Ways to appreciate baseball history. There's so much you can do around the game. And I hope those that are interested give it a shot. And it doesn't mean you have to give up on football. It doesn't mean you have to give up on the NBA. Just figure out how you can add it to your responsibly, so you don't leave your spouse watching
Well,
TV by
you
themselves,
know,
responsibly, of course. So hopefully that answered your question.
in this household, if I'm doing that, then Gossip Girl takes over on the TV. I can
Gossip
just
Girl, that's an
slide
old. Now
over
that's
to
the
the
new
side.
age one. I remember the old age one, the original one that goes back 20 years. Now I'm gonna get killed because like, Mike, you watch Gossip Girl. I did at one point, not anymore.
It was good
My
back in
wife
the
and I
day.
enjoy plenty of Netflix shows or
Yeah,
Apple
man.
TV or Hulu. Like every night and look, that's the thing about baseball. I can have a Netflix show watching my
Hmm.
wife, and on my iPad, I can have the game on at times on silent.
Too right.
Sometimes that's good. And you could I mean, that's the thing about baseball. It can be part of your life, and you could get all the excitement and drama and you don't have to necessarily I don't feel like you have to dedicate every second of the game for 3 hours every day to appreciate it.
It's a secret to a happy marriage, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I've got MLB Game Pass. I can load it up on my iPhone. I can be cooking in the kitchen. Everything's fine.
And
We're across the
how
games.
is it hard? So for you guys, you're 6 hours ahead. So when the Mets start,
Yeah.
and I think, and let me put this out there is a huge, and I've been humbled by this contingent of those that live in the UK that have attached myself to their podcast who are Mets fans. I believe there's a UK Mets fan that has had an article, if I'm not mistaken, the New York Times a few
That's
years.
right. Yeah, that's right.
I can't remember his name right now because I remember his UK Mets fan. So I apologize if you're listening. I apologize. I know that you're out there and I followed you. And they're huge, and they are actually have attached themselves to the Mets story, the narrative, the growth as the little brother in New York, the rise in the 80s, and this constant battle like Sisyphus, the old Greek mythology, trying to get the rock over the hill since 86 and not happening. They've attracted themselves to that. So I'm really hoping that others come in, because as a Mets fan, I love to grow the team in London, and maybe I'm being Pollyannish here, a de facto home team there in London a little bit. Maybe we could see that.
I wouldn't be surprised, given the London New York kind of connection,
Sure.
and Philly fans are they're a special breed, aren't they? And
yes.
Look, they're going to
think about the most obnoxious fan base in the UK. I can't speak for that. I'll let you speak that. You could get in trouble because I don't know, and everybody can't stand. The Mets are not Chelsea. Let's remember that. They're I'm trying to remember. My late grandfather was a football fan in Portugal, and he rooted for FC Porto, which apparently was like the Mets, or they were not the big club.
Yeah, they're not the Sporting or Benficas of the world.
Yeah. So I look at this and I said to myself, my grandfather, who I know nothing about football there, had the same passion for the same type of team that I now in American sports are rooting for. So it's interesting how this all connects, and maybe I'm just rambling, but I find it interesting nonetheless.
No, I mean, I don't want to put myself. Yeah, I'll put myself out. Liverpool fans, I think again they're a special breed. Merseyside is.
And remember, Liverpool fans, he's saying it. He's saying it, not me. Don't, because I already have enough people mad at me for something I said. And trying to cancel me. Don't cancel me yet. Give me a shot. Cancel him.
Cancel him. Yeah, they've got their thing going on in Merseyside, and it is it's them against the world. So yeah, I could see a Philly kind of relationship between the Merseysiders, the Scousers, and Philadelphia. But yeah, I could see the Mets picking up over here, because it's that big city thing. Everybody, they look to New York, and it's the city of dreams and all that, the Big Apple. So I can see the appetite for the Mets for sure over this weekend when they're over here. So people taking it in for the first time, unless Bryce Harper puts on a show. I'll go wash my mouth out in just a second, but maybe he catches the attention and the minds of some of the younger audience, because let's face it, it's that younger audience. It's the next generation of baseball
trying
fans
to grab them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're trying to grab them.
That success with the NFL over here. The Jags have really invested, the Jacksonville Jaguars, in the UK market, and I think it's definitely worked. And you can see it growing. I've been covering NFL London games for more than a decade, and you've seen the growth of it. And I think likewise with MLB, lots of like the Mets UK fan base, there's a Phillies UK fan base, you name it, every team is represented, and there is an engagement to those social sites. I think that's really well as MLB.
Yeah. Europe. I think, and shame on me, not thinking about it or realizing it, because you get so caught in your narrow, having those clubs, we'll call them, just for lack of those groups or those social media, whatever you want to call it. I think that's where the growth happens, because when I heard all these UK Mets fans contact me when I was doing the show, I'm like, okay, 1, I get it. 2, all right. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this team's pretty popular. And they're like, hey, Mike, your show is liked here. I'm like, well, maybe I should move to the UK and do best baseball there. Maybe I make more of a play, because people around here ain't loving me that much, but it's pretty cool, and I think that's what the sport needs. And see, I keep hearing people say, "Well, they don't market Mike Trout good enough," and You see, baseball's not a sport that you can do what the NBA did with Jordan. I don't
Mm,
think it's one guy.
yeah.
It's regional here because it's about the uniform, it's about the connection, and then the players come in and out of that region and that team. You'll have a beloved Darryl Strawberry that just got his number retired. But it's not like you're a Strawberry. Maybe you like Strawberry and you started liking the Mets because of Strawberry. But I think a lot of times it's because of the regionality. Baseball was passed down from fathers and mothers to their kids. How many people have said, my mom was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan,
Mm,
or my dad was a New York Giants fan, and then they became Mets fans. Hey, look, I became a Mets fan because my dad was a Mets fan. My
right.
uncle, my late uncle, he was a Yankees fan. So they both came to this country from Europe. They didn't know anything about baseball in the early
Right.
60s. One got the Mets, one got the Yankees. I would have thought in the UK, the Yankees, because of their history,
Yeah.
would have been more popular. But I get this sense that the UK people that have really latched on to the Mets narrative, which everyone says is the lovable little brother and they almost miss. And that's not unfair, but it's such a passion about hope and community. And these guys are sometimes they're insanely annoying. Like any dysfunctional family, you hate your uncle, this or that. But you know what? You may hate each other or argue at the dinner table. I shouldn't say hate, argue at the dinner table.
Mm,
But in the end, it's our dysfunction. And I feel like they've embraced that. And it's pretty cool because from an out, in it, you don't necessarily appreciate it. But when you have somebody from the UK explain it to you and maybe appreciate the sport more than you do as an American pastime, it makes you say, hey, maybe we need to, step back a little bit and appreciate what we have in front of us. I mean, Strawberry, said something on Saturday during his number retirement ceremony. He had number 18 retired. For those who don't
mm,
know, appreciate this. He challenged the current team to embrace the pressure of New York, and he even said to the fans, appreciate what you have in the moment because it goes by. I remember the late 80s Mets like it was yesterday. It was almost 40 years ago the Mets won a
yeah.
World Series. I remember the late 90s Mets as I grew up as a late teenager into adulthood like it was yesterday. That's a long time ago. That's
Mm,
25 years ago. So I look up, I think of myself as a young baseball fan in the late 80s, and the early 60s, that seemed like so far away. Meanwhile, here I am looking back 25 years ago, nostalgic for Mike Piazza and Robin Ventura and Al Leiter. I'm like, holy, that's the guys that I used to look at as a kid and go, oh, what are they talking about? So appreciate it. And I hope that those that go out to the ballpark this weekend, it was 6 years ago the Yankees were there.
dude.
It goes by fast.
It does. It does. It goes by so fast. And
Yeah.
the point that you made there, and I think, well, I know that the success for the NFL and also baseball is this digital world that we're living in. It's no
Yeah.
longer this exotic, far off, destination,
All
sport you might
together.
be able to get
Yeah.
on like a hissy radio. You can watch it. We can get the home runs as
Yep.
quick as a flash,
Yep.
on social media. I have MLB Game Pass. I have NFL Game Pass. I can
Yep.
watch any game pretty much live
Right.
as it happens. And if not, I can
Right.
consume the highlights as quickly as I
Yep.
want. So teams are so much more accessible. Your podcast is
Yep.
accessible to everyone.
Never would have thought. When
You
I
know?
started radio in 2007 in a little radio station on Long Island, never
Mm,
would have thought somebody. Now there was streaming back then.
mm.
Never would have thought somebody in the UK would be listening. I wouldn't think they cared about baseball.
Crazy, isn't it?
So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
But
And
then
and look, like football has become popular here. I know a lot of
that's
people who
the point I was
who
going to
love
make. Yeah.
Chelsea or love and I haven't. I only have so much bandwidth for sports. I could appreciate. I mean, I got the Knicks, I got the Mets, I got this media venture, as you know, Anthony. It's not the only thing. When you're in media, you gotta pay the bills. You can't
That's
just. I
right.
love them. But I appreciate it. But I don't have that bandwidth. But a lot of people do, and that's a pretty cool thing because you and I hate to go back to Ted Lasso because that's not real. But if you watch that, you can see all the benefits of what European football bring. And there are some similarities with the drama and the nuance and the
Mm,
little things. Football, I'll call it football, not soccer. It's not just about that goal, it's what happened to set that goal up. That's baseball.
mm.
It's not the strikeout, it's how you got to that 3-2 count or that 1-2 count that set up the pitch. That's the pitcher's pitch to strike the batter out. That there's a lot of similarities. And I think that those who are new to the game should, that's the stuff you want to learn. And the only way that comes is experience. You don't have a book. I can't give you a book. I can't tell it to you in 30 minutes or less. Watch it night in and night out. Read, listen, ask questions. And before you know it, I mean, I got 40 years of this.
You're right.
You're not going to get that in a year or two. You will get there. And you get there with the amount of information out there. You may get there a lot quicker than I did.
Well, listen to the Talkin Mets podcast, and you can get all the
Absolutely.
education and information that you need, Mike.
That's
Let's
true.
get your perspective on this rivalry, this NL East rivalry, because it seems to be rivalries that we get over here in
Yep.
London. So it kicked
Yep.
off, like we said, a few years ago, pre-COVID. My goodness, the Red
Yep.
Sox and the Yankees, and last year we had the Cardinals and the Cubs, and of course now it's the Mets and the Phillies. So how deep is this rivalry? And are they? Do you hate the Phillies? And do you hate the
Yeah,
Phillies
I'll
more
answer
than
this.
the Yankees, for example? Just
That's a tough one. So,
whoa,
as I got older, and I'll call it sports hate because everybody uses the word hate. And I think that
yeah,
that sometimes gets over. I like to clarify it's sports hate. And yet
yeah,
it is a real thing, sports hate. That it definitely is. But in this day and age, I got to clarify because sometimes people take it too far. But anyway, the Mets historically have never, and the Phillies, even though that they're 90 miles apart, and you would think geographically would be rivals, they've never really been at the top at the same time, except for '06, '07, '08, when the Mets had a couple of late season collapses. The Phillies were building up their championship team. And there was personalities on the Phillies side that were very unlikable. Jimmy Rollins,
mm,
Jason Worth, Shea Sutley, who became infamous when he went to the Dodgers for hurting a Mets player and breaking their leg and actually a spearheading change of some rules and what have you. And that to me, those 3 or 4 years is when the Mets Phillies rivalry between the fans and the Mets and those teams were at its height. They haven't really had their seasons co-joined at the same time since. So I would say the Mets and the Yankees, because of the natural rivalry there, that's been something, especially in the late 90s when the Yankees were on top and the Mets were trying to grab what the Yankees have. That was something there. The Mets and the Braves have had probably a bigger rivalry than the Mets and the Phillies, and there's no geographic connection. The thing about the Mets, and even to a certain degree, I'm a basketball fan of the Knicks, their rivalries have been based on who is in the way of each other. So the Knicks have had Indiana and Miami and the Bulls. The Mets have had the Braves and the Phillies, and the Yankees always in the background.
mm,
In the 80s, it was the Cardinals and the Mets. There's no geography. So I think a lot of the baseball, especially for the Mets, their rivalries have been who's in our way trying to stop us from getting to where we want to get, which is winning a championship again, and
mm.
having the glory. So right now, the Mets have a lot of teams in front of them. So I could call, but certainly because the Philadelphia fan is almost like a little brother to the little brother. So the Met fan will take the on the chin from the Yankees. They got the 27 rings. The
Yeah.
Mets have not achieved that. But when the Phillies, who have had some success themselves in the llast 20 years, do it to the Met, like, hey, listen, I'll take their crap. I'm not taking your crap. So it's kind of like the little brother. But I think the Mets really, and the fans looking at what the Phillies have put together a really good starting rotation. Their bullpen solid. They got some really gritty, professional core players and some good, what I call component players around the hub. That's what the Mets need to aspire to be. They thought they had some of those guys.
Mm.
They do have some of those guys. When you look at the back of their baseball card, they just haven't performed that way. They're playing better. They have a third game this afternoon against the Nats. Maybe they sweep the Nats, go into London on a high. And then we'll see. Look, if the Mets turn this thing around, and it's going to be hard, maybe the London series will be on the highlight video the point where, hey, the Mets were starting to win. They go to London. They have a good series in London. They have a day, a couple of days off in between, those two series, and then they take off. And then we could thank the good people of the UK and London for helping bring the Mets to the playoffs. And then we're forever tied again in something else. We'll build a new fan base in the UK. The Mets fans will rise, and all of a sudden you'll be walking down the street in London or visiting Big Ben, and there'll be Mets hats all over the place. Who knows? What I want to know is, will anybody from the royal family be in presence, and will they be listening to the show? Because if I
Well,
know my voice is being blasted in Buckingham Palace, I have arrived, Anthony. That's what I want to know. I
well, you
watch
know
The
what?
Crown too. So I know a little bit about the royal family.
Well, literally from about 25 miles from where I am recording this podcast,
Yep.
Prince William, he lives
Look at
he lives
that.
in Windsor.
Prince William,
So
I'm
who
listening.
knows?
You will learn a lot about the Mets from me. You could feel free to have your people email me. I'm not looking for scandal. I just want you to learn about Mets baseball. That's it. So there
Prince
you go.
Prince Billy, if you're listening, your brother
You could call him
went.
Billy. I won't.
And your sister-in-law threw the first pitch of the first ever London Series game. That was for the
I didn't know that.
Yankees. You know, you got the sibling rivalry. So,
There you go.
William,
There you go.
you want to support
King
a team? The New York Mets. Get
King
yourself
Charles,
down.
if you're healthy enough, come on out for
Come
the
on,
first
dude.
pitch. There you go. Just make sure you just on the interview say, yeah, I found all about this Talkin Mets podcast. All of a sudden I'll have, too many listeners, and then pressure's on. But
awesome. And then, likewise, when the Mets are over here and they're speaking to me on Friday, they say, ever since we spoke to Anthony Wootton, follow him on social media at AR Wootton, that's WOOTTON.
There you go.
Ever since then, our season turned around. And then,
there
Mike,
you
you and I, we're like brothers from another mother, and we are embracing.
Absolutely. Look, our countries are connected. At some point, you and I were both, we were together in another, lineage down the line.
Yeah.
Maybe, we were working in London as a merchant, or maybe we were in the, the Royal Navy. Who knows? Who knows what our prior life is? But all I know is now we're in simpatico talking about sports on both sides of the pond, and that's really cool. That's really
absolutely cool. Love it, Mike. I could talk forever. There's many questions, but
I hope we're going to try to connect after the series, and you can come on the Talkin Mets podcast and give your perspective. And again, I hope that those Mets fans of the UK, and I can't name all of them. I know my good friend Liam over there always listens to the show and has been a very big inspiration and fan of rooting me on and stuff like that. UK Mets fan, and there's so many others. So please, if you're listening, I'm kind of trying to think of all your names on the top of my head, and I can't right now. So all my UK listeners that have emailed me, listened, sent me tweets on X, I can't figure out. Is it X? Is it Twitter? I forget.
Yeah, no, it's what it's.
Please
it's
know I appreciate you. I hope you're out there watching the game in person if you can make it. I wish, because people have invited me, I wish I could have made it to London. I just couldn't make it this year. Hopefully, when the Mets go back at some point, I will. And I thank you guys for supporting the show, and please support Anthony's show, and please enjoy yourselves out there. And those who don't listen to Talking Mets, you can still sign up and listen, but you can enjoy yourselves too out there and have some fun this weekend. And I'll be watching 6 hours behind at 10 a.m., which is going to be interesting. I'm going to have my breakfast. I got to wake up early on a Sunday. And by 1 o'clock, my day's done. That's great. And then you and I could connect later in the day and recap the weekend. That'll be really cool. So
sounds great. Hey, before I go, you'll like this, Mike. I'm taking the family out to the East Coast in August and taking them to a baseball game. I've got a 12-year-old. The 12-year-old, his first baseball game was actually the London Series back in 2019. The youngest, he's 10. Their first baseball experience, their first stateside baseball experience, August the 14th, Mets. A's. I'm taking over to Citi Field, my man. So if you have any tips, then
I will get you tips. We'll talk about that. Citi Field's a great experience. It's actually some good stuff for a young sports fan, not baseball related, like around the stadium.
Okay.
One other quick story. I'll get you to irony. When I got into this business in independent media as just a fan, I never went to school for this. David Hughes, I don't know if he's listening, big Yankees fan. He created a site, New York Baseball Online, NY Baseball Online. And he lived in London. That was the first. So interesting. Somebody from London got me involved in independent media and was the first person that got my name out there.
Oh, get out.
Wow, almost 20 years ago. So it's interesting how it works. But yes, when you come to the States, would love to give you tips about Citi Field, and you'll have some fun. And look, maybe by that time the Mets are, in a playoff hunt, and you'll be seeing some big games, and you get to see baseball in a different perspective.
I might even have a beer with you out there while we're at
Absolutely. Catch up with me. I'd love to stop by the ballpark and get to meet your lovely family. It'd be cool. It's always nice that this thing could bring us, who would never meet, could bring us all together. That's really cool.
It's the beauty of sport, my man. Well, look, finally, one last thing before you go. How can people follow you? Where should they check you out?
You could go to talkingmetspodcast.com. No G, I always say. You get me on X at Talkin Mets No G. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, it's free to sign up. There is a paid $5 a month subscription. If you want to get some additional content written, Talkin Mets, substack.com / Talkin Mets No G. Look, it's just a great way to complement your Mets fandom, whether you're new to the sport, tenured in the sport. You'll enjoy it. And, I hope that you guys check me out. I hope you continue to support Anthony. And I'm looking forward to good baseball this weekend and seeing the good people of London enjoy America's pastime.
Thanks very much, Mike. Bring it on.
All right. Be well, Anthony. We'll talk again. Take care, my friend.
And there goes Mike Silva from Talkin Mets podcast. Make sure that you check him out. And also, Follow us on social media. You're going to want to do that this weekend, especially for the MLB London series, because we've got field access. We're going to have access to the players and the coaches as well. And we're going to put together a nice special audio podcast, especially for the London series, wrapping up the 2024 MLB London series at the London Stadium, so you'll be able to relive this magical weekend. But across the weekend, lots of video content coming your way across social media platforms at TASS_UK, and I am at AR Wootton on X, WOOTTON. And of course, like I said, follow the Talkin Mets podcast and Mike Silva and the fine work that he's doing there as well. I hope you've enjoyed this series of podcasts building up to this MLB London series this weekend, and that we've managed to educate you in the world of baseball and this NL East rivalry. Still to come here on the Transatlantic Sports Show is, like I said, the recap of the MLB London series, and then we'll be looking forward to the NFL season. There'll be a few NFL players coming over to the UK. We'll get some exclusive interviews with those guys, plus a whole lot more. There's still news breaking around the world of the NFL. We'll be covering that here on the Transatlantic Sports Show. And when the London games, the Munich games come around, we'll be there. And of course, at the Super Bowl in New Orleans as well. We get some great access here on the Transatlantic Sports Show. So if you're new to us, welcome. Do us a favor, please tell your friends as well to check us out, both audio podcasts and your favorite podcast provider, and on YouTube. Just check us out at the Transatlantic Sports Show. That is at TASS_UK. Enjoy the baseball if you're going. Enjoy it on the TV if you're not and you've managed to watch it. Until next time.